What's up, everybody? I'm Joel Rafidi. Got Yerasimos in the house with me. We're the co-hosts of the Here for the Truth podcast. We have the pleasure of hosting Will before. And Will, thank you so much for the invitation to speak here today at your online event, Freedom Under Natural Law. We'll keep this one pretty brief. Let's get straight into it. All right, so the name of our presentation today is Wholeness, Not Perfection, Unlocking True Inner Freedom. And to open this up, we have a quote from the great Walt Whitman. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. Immediately brings to mind echoes of the great Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. So if you really are a microcosm of this universe, then that's a whole lot of information, traits, and contradictions that exist within you. I think about all the astrological archetypes, all the gods that have been written about, all the personality types. I think about Aries opposing Libra, Cancer opposing Leo, one part of you opposing another, the compassionate, nurturing, and pathetic domestic side, the grandiose, over-the-top, entertaining show pony. You are not just a single constellation of traits. You are the whole thing. Just as there are infinite stars in the universe, we're here to tell you that you too have infinite ways of being, and none of those ways needs to be disowned nor repressed.
Another great quote by Carl Gustav Jung: wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we cut off portions of our own being? Now, this in itself can be an entire thesis. But very often we cut off parts of us, because of, going along with the crowd. We cut parts of us off because of trauma, et cetera, from a general standpoint. But more specifically, we all grow up in different families. We grow up in a different country. We grow up in a different culture. There are different dominant ideas that drive the behavior around us. And so what really happens, if you think about it from a foundational standpoint, just imagine a baby. A baby is born into this world completely vulnerable. It needs to be taken care of by its primary caregivers, etc. Now, there's a whole subject we can get into there, but just again, in a much more specific way, through a specific lens, we need to understand that as we grow up, certain parts of us, certain behaviors are approved of. They're deemed desirable by our parents, teachers, school, etc. And other parts are undesirable. And so what happens is this whole personality development process, beyond just, tendencies that come from our ancestry, that come from, the date, time, and birth we were born, et cetera, if you want to get into that. But generally speaking, is that we respond to our environment in a certain way, to certain stimuli. And so when we over-identify with certain behaviors, because mom and dad say, hey, this is the way you need to be in life, we lose a deep, deep connection to the wisdom of those parts that get pushed down into our unconscious.
So for thousands of years, the primary conglomerate or group of philosophies and ideas driving the collective psychological attitude has been that of religious thought, and primarily the Judeo-Christian ethic. Now, ultimately, this particular ethic holds the belief that certain human behaviors and traits, like Yerasimos mentioned, are desirable and others are not. It believes that human beings come into the world with parts of themselves that are inherently evil and must be atoned for through a life of partial guilt and punishments. Guilt without proof, mind you. So these ideas are intergenerationally ingrained in our individual psyches, and most people live their entire lives fractioned as a result. Due to these programs, they seek to cut out the undesirable parts, the jealous part, the desiring part, right? And they over-identify with that which the collective deems desirable, which purely ultimately means whatever the collective upholds as the good and moral attributes of the time. So from the get-go, we're fractioned. We become against ourselves in a multitude of ways. And while we might think we're simply cutting out the bad and cutting out the shadow, we're cutting out incredible gifts and life force available to us as well.
Speaking of inner contradictions, another brilliant mind, Erich Newman, this is a quote from him: to deny or cut off parts of oneself is to distort and fragment the wholeness of the psyche, leading to a sense of inner division and inner conflict. So again, what do we mean by this? It means that if we want to be whole, we need to have a curious mind. We need to be able to reflect and gain wisdom from these aspects of self, and so it's like, how do we figure out where we're repressed? Something I like to talk about often is that we can learn a lot through our judgments, through the people we over admire. And so through this process, we get to realize, hey, what do I need to integrate into my life? Not only that, we gain a lot of wisdom from our dreams. Carl Jung used to say dreams are messages from God. And so we have different images, different archetypes, different characters that come to us in our dreams to like highlight to us if we have the openness and the intention to continue to grow, parts of us that we need to reclaim to become more whole. And I've given this example before, and I want to talk about it here because I think it's really, really important to show how when we deny or cut off parts of ourselves, they impact our life. So I was in a workshop once with the great teacher of mine, Dr. Hal Stone, and his wife, Dr. Sidra Stone, and we were talking about dreams. And this one woman, she was a psychologist, and she was sharing this dream. I think she was middle-aged. She was sharing this dream, and she was talking about Hitler, the archetype, the energy of Hitler came into her dream. And so Hal said to her, he said, hey, so let's say we took that energy, that image, that archetype of Hitler, and we threw it into a big pot, a stock pot. We added water to it. We boiled it down until it came to this reduced mixture. And then we took one of those droppers, and we got a droppers full of that reduced down energy, and we just put a drop or two underneath your tongue. And he goes to her, how would that help your life? And immediately it's like she tapped into that energy, and she was like, I would be able to speak my mind. I would be able to set boundaries. I would be able to say no, etc. So if we get over-identified with, let's say, the opposite of that energy, and now I'm using this as an extreme example, but let's say you're a huge people pleaser. You can't stand up for yourself. You can't set boundaries. You're going to look at someone that is able to set boundaries, is able to set no. Very likely you're going to judge them as being like mean or selfish, whatever the case may be. So by utilizing the image from the dream, by feeling into it, or by looking out into the world to see where our judgments lie, we can gain wisdom. It doesn't mean we need to become that part 100%, but we can see where there are gifts of that opposite that we have disowned and that we have repressed within. And so again, with the Erich Newman quote, it's just like, when we repress and cut off these parts of us, we don't have that wholeness. We don't have that deep connection. We don't have that ability to see the gifts of these different parts of us.
Well said. So scapegoating and projection. Ultimately, this is the externalization of evil. Okay. So most people who have these disowned parts and highly repressed parts, they ultimately, like Yerasimos said, go through a process of creating an external scapegoat out of the evil that they refuse to acknowledge within. So those outside of us who carry those parts, which we've been programmed and conditioned ourselves to believe are undesirable, okay, we externalize it and we judge it harshly outside of ourselves. So ultimately, these people are disowning parts of their own being and psychic structure. And in doing so, they're also bypassing the shadow. So think about the multitude of external scapegoats for evil that we have, whether it's Satan, whether it's aliens, whether it's liberals, conservatives, Muslims, anti-vaxxers, pro-vaxxers, normies, political leaders, whatever it might be. So this is a very, very, very potent way, like Yerasimos mentioned, to highlight what is disowned within ourselves. And again, another Erich Newman quote to reinstate this. He says, through projection, we attribute qualities, desires, or fears to others that actually belong to ourselves, but which we are unable or unwilling to acknowledge.
What is banished within appears externally as fate. I mean, if that doesn't say it all, I don't know what does. I know Jung had a quote that related to this, and I think this really shows up in relationships. You know, people say opposites attract. Now, again, I think there needs to be some level of balance within a partnership, but you see very often where two people come together. You know, it's like that honeymoon period. They get so drawn in and so connected to each other. And very often what's happening is that like a person is attracted to the parts of them that are disowned within themselves, repressed within themselves, but the other person carries, you know? And so the universe, whatever you want to call it, reality is sending you people in your life very often to highlight the parts of you that you have yet integrated. Now, again, this isn't about becoming the other person, because what happens often in relationship is that in the beginning, these opposites are what draw people together, and they're like cute and sweet, and oh wow, that's amazing. But then after a few months, they become annoying. And so the gift there is to realize, hey, this person is carrying something within them that I have not reclaimed within myself. So can I, again, is there a homeopathic dose that I can get of a quality that this person's holding so I can be more integrated, so I can be more balanced? And this is what it means by even growing in partnership, is that we get to integrate some of these parts that we've lost, and we've projected onto others.
Yeah. Ultimately, the unavoidable psychological reality is that whatever is consciously banished from within unconsciously appears externally as fate. Okay. And again, I'll take it back to the Judeo-Christian ethic. Consider the 100 years of war, death, and tyranny that have resulted from groups trying to destroy the evil out there while refusing to acknowledge it within. Think of the countless highly dutiful religious individuals who go through the unexplainable midlife crisis. Adultery, lying, cheating, and abuse, all commonplace within the homes of those who present the perfect external ideals of virtue, honor, and worship. Okay. And this brings us to this point very succinctly, which is whatever is repressed within eventually will stink. Like a house built upon a sewer, regardless of how strong the foundation is laid, sooner or later the stench will enter one's daily life.
Yeah, I mean, right here too, you think about all these examples, and I think Joel maybe mentioned it before. It's just like these parts that we repress, that we have no connection to, they come out in really twisted ways. I mean, how many news stories do you need to watch about some spiritual leader, about some hardcore religious leader that gets caught, like they're like denouncing sexual activity or homosexuality, and then they get caught engaging in that act as they're like smoking crystal meth or something. You know what I mean? It's just like ridiculous. And so again, this isn't about perfection and idealizing certain ways. It's about understanding that we do, as mentioned before, we contain this universe within. We you know, a couple analogies I like to use in terms of the psyche is like, one, look at a diamond. Like a diamond has many different facets, and the light can shine through in different ways. And so we have many facets. We contain multitudes, but one of the main ones is that think of yourself as your psyche as an orchestra. Okay, you're the conductor. You have this center part, the executor of the psyche, and yet we have all these different instruments within us. You know, and we either have access to the tunes they play, to the sounds they play, or we don't. And so imagine an orchestra with just like 3 instruments, you know? And also imagine behind the stage, there's a curtain, there's all these other instruments that you're not even aware of. And so, like, if you're not even connected to them, if you don't have a relationship with them, you know, they can really impact your life in a negative way. So the goal really is to have this connection to all the different instruments within us, to play different tunes, to have more potential, to have more choice in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no escaping the unconscious, right? That's ultimately what we're saying here. Whatever's there is going to come up and disrupt your life. And this is how self-sabotage is born. It's people trying to shut down and escape from that deeper intuition that is letting us know that something needs to be resolved. Something's starting to stink. So
The old
go for it.
Okay. Yeah. The old way of being idolizes perfection. The new way of being idolizes wholeness. Perfection requires disowning parts of ourselves. Wholeness requires integrating them. Perfection asks that you squash, tuck away, and run from your pain. Wholeness asks that you inquire into its source. Now, again, we're giving a little bit of summary of some of the things that we've talked about already.
Yeah. First and foremost, do not become an enemy unto oneself, right? If there was a Bible of wholeness, in my opinion, this should be the first commandment. We're all here in flesh, not just as thinking beings, but as feeling beings. So what's sacred? What's sacred is the human experience. What's worth worshipping is the human experience. That's the Holy Grail, the human experience. An experience is meant to be experienced. So why do we go out of our way to relinquish parts of this experience as unworthy or as undesirable when ultimately you're having it for a reason, right? We should be falling in love with the entire dynamic, the entire spectrum. It's all here available to us, and we are within it for a reason. So the goal in life, most people are seeking perfection, which ultimately equates to repression. But the goal in life should not be perfection. It should be to become more conscious, which ultimately leads us to wholeness. And for this to take place, we must choose to engage with the natural flow of the evolution of our consciousness, which is yearning to sprout from literally within the core of every single one of us. And this is how you access more control. And the reason we're here, more freedom, true internal freedom over your behaviors and choices. As we bring these parts into greater conscious awareness, they light up. And as they light up, we gain access to them. We gain control over them. They can come out in ways that are controlled, not in ways that are toxic and unconscious.
At the end of the day, repression leads to unconscious, toxic lashing out of the undesirable traits. Wholeness leads to spaciousness between stimulus and response, granting us the freedom to have conscious choice over our decisions. We want to be able to have a container to hold space for these tension of opposites, so we have more choice and we have more freedom to interact and interact with our environment and the stimuli.
Yeah. I mean, the psyche of the individuals who choose to live by the ethic of wholeness is much more secure in its foundations. It's much more resilient, simply because it has consciously assimilated the elements of its nature that would easily throw others out of balance should they encounter them, right? We're talking about a psyche that's tall and deep. It's equipped to experience true enjoyment, fulfillment, and satisfaction because it knows and it's become acquainted with the opposite, whether it's fear, panic, terror, jealousy, guilt, etc.
So again, consider this, everything that we're saying as an invitation to soften, to turn the gaze of consciousness within, and to become a gentle friend to all the parts of you, which is what it's about, embracing all these parts of you. To extend that hand of curiosity to the aspects of your psyche that you've rendered to the realm of undesirable. Really getting to know yourself, love yourself, accept yourself, and be curious. Be curious on why you are the way you are and why things developed the way they developed.
Yeah, be curious about your conditioning, be curious about your programming, okay? And be willing to literally, extend a hand and put an arm around these parts which maybe have been repressed and disowned within you. Because literally the quality and the strength of your vitality and life force is tied up where you've consciously or unconsciously created these blockages within your own psychic system. Now, this work is an ongoing process for every single one of us, okay? Wholeness is never complete, that journey. So this is the perfect place to start. You are where you are for a reason, and ultimately it couldn't be any other way. Guys, thanks so much for listening to our presentation. We are Joel and Yerasimos from the Here for the Truth podcast. You can find all our episodes, 125 plus now at hereforthetruth.com. A lot of great information there as well. And if you're interested in diving deeper into this work, we've got an 8-week group coaching program specifically for truth seekers to lead lives of authenticity, purpose, and potential. The current round is now open for applications. I think there's 8 spots left, and you can learn more and apply at riseabovetheherd.co. Again, such an honor to be here and present to you all. Be well.
Thank you.